The next thing we want to talk about is setting up the drill press for drilling operation. The very first thing we need to do is determine what it is that we want to do. Do we want to drill a hole? Do we want to sand something? Do we want to grind something? In this case, we want to drill a hole. So we're going to grab our drill index and we're going to drill a 3/8 diameter hole into a piece of wood. Okay? This will allow us to put a bolt through the piece of wood in case we want to bolt something together. First thing we're going to do is we're going to put the drill bit into the chuck. Okay? The drill bit should never be past the flutes going into the chuck. It should grab onto the smooth section of the drill bit. If it has flat faces on the drill bit, those are the sides we should be grabbing with the chuck itself. So we're going to open up the chuck and we're going to tighten it up by hand so the drill bit stays in there, and then we're going to get the chuck key, and to tighten up the drill chuck we're going to put the chuck key in the first position. There's 3 holes in here. We're going to snug it up to the first position. We're going to move it to the second position. We're going to make it a little bit tighter, and then we're going to move it to the third position, and we're going to make it as tight as we can. The reason why we tighten it in 3 spots is the 3 chuck jaws on here will now tighten uniformly all the way around. If we only tighten one spot, there's a tendency of the drill bit wobbling afterwards. Okay? Once we have the drill bit tightened in place, we need to return the chuck key back to its location, snapped on the side of the drill press. The other thing we should never do when we're using a drill press, we should never drill directly down into the table. If we drill directly down into the table with this type of a drill bit, we can actually drill holes directly through the table, and eventually it's going to destroy our table for us. So we should always back up our piece of material we're drilling with a piece of plywood, piece of wood, or something else. We should never drill directly down on top of that table. Okay? So the next thing we need to do, because the drill bit will not reach this far down, we need to elevate our table. So we're going to loosen off the lock on the back side of the table, and we're going to use the crank to elevate. Now this piece of plywood is going to be underneath the piece we're going to be drilling, and the drill itself is going to be going through another piece that we're drilling. This is going to go in here. So what we need to do is when we're finished drilling, this drill has to go completely through here and just barely touching into the wood backup piece. We're going to lift this up. We're going to make our drill bit approximately 1/4 of an inch higher than the piece that we want to drill. So we're going to lift up the table to that approximation. Okay, this isn't precise, this just has to be close, so it gives us some room to work in there. And then we're going to lock the table, because if we don't lock the table is allowed to turn sideways on us. Okay? Now we can actually almost start ready to drill. Now, when we do like this, we notice that the depth stop on this side isn't allowing us to go all the way through the piece of material. So we want to make sure it goes all the way through. So I'm just going to move to the other side, and we're going to adjust the depth stop for you. Okay, and the depth stop, once we have it turned down like this, the depth stop is on here. We want to go down approximately another 1/2 inch. So if we look at our 2 lock nuts here for the depth stop, we're going to free them up. Going to open them up. They do get jammed in here at times. And we're going to open them up, and we're going to lift it up approximately 1/2 inch. So when we lift them up to that height, now we're going to take and turn this down. Does it go through the wood piece? Is there a little bit of clearance here? So it's going to go through, but not all the way through the support piece. And my answer at this point in time is yes. So we need to jam these 2 nuts together again. We're slowly going to let that up. We're going to jam these 2 nuts together so the adjustment does not change. And now when we go to move our drill down, it will go into the piece of wood, all the way through the piece of wood, into our backup piece, approximately 1/4 of an inch. So this is a good setting for us. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to clamp our workpiece down to the table. Whenever we're working with pieces of wood on here, we should always try and clamp it down, especially if they're short pieces of wood like this. The tendency is if the drill bit gets stuck in the piece of wood, it's going to want to spin. If it's clamped down, it can't spin. If we're holding it in our hand, it can spin out of our hand. We can sprain our wrist, we can break a finger, or we will break the piece of wood, because as it's spinning, post at the backside, the column will keep it from turning around if it's long enough, and a lot of times it will smash the piece of wood. Okay, so we're just going to grab some clamps now. these clamps, we're going to make sure that we clamp the piece of wood to the table that's also clamped to the piece of plywood underneath. So we're going to tighten that down so that it doesn't move. I'm going to move to the other side. We're going to clamp down this side as well. Always make sure when you're using clamps, you clamp down both sides. I'm sure you can see a bit of a gap here. As soon as I tighten it down, that gap disappeared because it's now holding itself flat. We're now almost ready to start drilling. The reason why I say almost is we need some power. Okay? This particular power cord is just a regular 110 cord. Simply plugs into the outlet. Make sure it's left back away from the drill press. And now we're going to pull the stop paddle, which is also the emergency stop, towards us. And we're going to push the button to turn on the drill press. Now the drill press is turning. We can pull the feed levers and it will slowly drill down into the block of wood. If something is not right for us, something doesn't feel right, we'll lift up the drill chuck and it'll stop drilling. Okay? You're going to go down nice and slow. Whenever you're drilling, you always want to go down nice and slow. Never force it, never go down extremely fast, because then the wood tends to bind and or break the piece of wood. So I've now hit the depth stop. I don't have to put a whole lot of weight on there. I can now lift it up. All the wood that was drilled in there is now coming out, and we're going to turn the drill press off. Once the drill has stopped turning, we can remove some of the debris. We can now unclamp our components. We can take a look at our wood that we've drilled. A nice clean hole from the top and from the bottom. The other advantage of using a backup piece of wood underneath your part you're drilling, when you come through the backside, if it's not supported, a lot of times it'll splinter the wood around the hole and then it's going to break it. And if this is a finished hole for a good side or visible side of your project, you want to make sure that it's nice and clean. Once you finish your drilling process, we need to remove all of the tools. Okay? Put the tools back to the tool room, not just leave them here on the shelf like I'm doing right now. We need to remove our backup piece of material. If it's to be staying with the drill press, that's fine. Clean it off, make sure the next person can come to it and use it. Now, the very last thing is whatever cutting bit you have in here, take this cutting bit out. Don't leave it in here, because the next person that comes along may accidentally damage it by bumping into it with the piece they're working with, or it may go back into a case like our drill bit case that's going to go back in our tool room, and if it's left here, it won't get back there, and the next time you want to go use that tool, it's not going to be in the case for you to use. Okay? So we're going to take the chuck key out, and now we're going to simply release the bit. Beware, these bits do get hot. If you've just drilled a lot of holes and you're taking it out, this could be very hot, so be careful, you may burn yourself on there. Return it back to your drill index. Put your chuck key back on the side of the drill. Return this back to the tool room with your clamps. Your project is now cleaned up. You're ready to move on to the next step of whatever it is that you're doing.